All right, hey bunnies. So I'm basically here today to do one of the videos that I promised, which was the Intj HSP Empath video, which I kind of combined two of the ideas, just because there's a lot of overlap. So I think that it's useful to be able to just kind of talk about both of them and how they relate to being an INTJ and also how they relate just to themselves and on its own. So I don't know how long this video is going to be. I think I'm going to keep it all in one video. It may be rather long. So just be prepared for that. Okay, so let's kind of like just jump right into it. So how do you define an HSP? So first of all, HSP stands for a highly sensitive person. Right. So if you look at Wikipedia, it's called also another way to refer to as SPS, which is sensory processing sensitivity. And it's considered a personality trait. And it's a high measure of what they define as a highly sensitive person. And it's basically having a lot of hypersensitivity to external stimuli. And it's also related to cognitive processing and also emotional reactivity. And then an empath, I think that this word is used interchangeably because there's empath, empathetic, and empathic. I've seen a bunch of different definitions for it, but basically, as an HSP, as a highly sensitive person, that likely overlaps with being empathetic or empathic. So for a lot of reasons, people prefer to say highly sensitive, right? So being empathic, it means that you're able to like relate to how people are feeling. And then just an empath in general, in terms of like metaphysics and esoteric meanings, is it's like clairsentient. So it's like the ability to understand and share feelings with another person, like, getting feeling and energy and vibes from people in the room. And as an overall sensitive person, sensitive both to my needs and other people's needs, I feel traces of that. I don't claim to be clairsentient because if I had any of those sort of sense, clairvoyant, clairsentient, any of the, I would be caking off of that right now. Like, I would not use it for some sort of higher purpose. Maybe I would use it for a higher purpose, but at a much later date. Like, I'd be making money. But I do feel energy, and I do pick up on the energy and mood in the room. And it causes me a lot of pain. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how this relates to mental health. Not so much. I'm not really want to delve into it in this particular video, but there tends to be an overlap with anxiety and certain nervous conditions. Okay, so also, I think it's interesting and worthwhile to say what being a highly sensitive person isn't. Well, the original person that defined it, and I'll put some links in the description box. But basically, is that if you have something like that, so if you have something that looks like being very reactive to stimuli, it's not necessarily doesn't mean you're shy. I think that when people think of a highly sensitive person, like, what the hell is that? You think of someone that's shy or someone that, maybe autistic. And yes, an autistic person can be an HSP, but that's not necessarily the case. So it's not really an overlap. It's like an autistic person could be a highly sensitive person, but not all highly sensitive people, or even a majority of them are on the spectrum. What it is, though, and in my personal experience, it's like, and I talked to my friend about this because he wondered what it's like to be able to have, highly in tune, nuanced senses in which you notice things people don't notice. You have a deeper you have a deeper connection to babies, animals, older people, as well as being very good at nonverbal communication and being able to peel back the layers of the general populace and predict things. And, I always said that, if you have introverted intuition and then you couple that with introverted feeling, it's just going to be very tumultuous. It's very unpleasant, actually. It can sound like something that seems wonderful, but really, when you peel back the layers to so many different underlying processes and patterns in our society, our modern society, it's dark. It's not good, So it's like you have all this information. I'm just moving right now. So you have all this information, this sort of intuitive pattern recognition and information, and you're just seeing a bunch of fuck shit, and it's like you can predict it, but like in general, people don't want to hear that. So I'm gonna get back to that and talk a little bit about what I feel in having introverted feeling versus extroverted feeling in a highly sensitive person. Is that I imagine if you have extroverted feeling, you don't have as much empathy, right? I think you have more sympathy for people than empathy. So I think that you have a protective layer that I don't have as someone with introverted feeling. Like, I'm going to feel things deeply. I'm going to make a visual image, and I'm going to align myself with the person. Instead of having sympathy, I'm going to have empathy. And hold on, give me a second. Oh, and another thing about just highly sensitive people in general, like I looked up the information, and we're about like 15% of the population, 15 to 20%. And basically it's like just people that process, data and sensory things deeply, and it has a lot to do with your nervous system. Right. So it's more a personality trait than a disorder. It's not a disorder. It's a personality trait, like extroversion or introversion, but it's just something different. Some things that, we respond to a lot is like, things hurt us. We feel all the different processes going through our body. Very sensitive to hunger. Like I often, as they say, hangry, like I get angry, despondent. I get very ill if I'm hungry, and I also become very reactive to, noises, being startled by people. I'm definitely that person that if you come up behind me, I'm going to scream, which is why I don't do very well with, street harassment or just like, guys or people in general, like coming up behind me in the street, like I'm going to scream. I'm going, I go straight into, a reactive mode always. It's really difficult for me to drink coffee too. It's like very bad for my nerves. So, and being a highly sensitive person, you have the gift of like, predicting people's behaviors and motivations. But then, like I said, most of the time it's bad. So even if that most is very slight, like even if you're able to predict certain underlying patterns to the universe, and 60% of the time, and that number, I'm trying to be positive on this Sunday, people don't want to share that darkness with you. So you end up kind of walking around with this, proverbial cloud over your head because the burden is on you. Like you have to be the one to kind of have your own back, because people are not going to heed your warnings. I also talk about, Cassandra, if you guys remember Cassandra, and, Apollo. This is like mythology. The Greek mythology. So she was a prophet, right? And Apollo tried to seduce her, and he gave her that power prophecy, but then she didn't want to date him. She curved him. And, the story goes that, he spat into her mouth and gave her the curse that, like, she would have this gift of prophecy, but no one would ever believe her prophecies. And so that's, like, one of the alternatives. So, so then that's ends up what it becomes. It becomes a tragedy more so. Because you have this gift and no one believes you, and you're like, oh my God, like, it just becomes a curse. Most things that are gifts are, conversely curses as well. So yeah, and I also think that when you have these abilities, it's very hard to not sound arrogant, because you're kind of like, oh yeah, I already know that. Oh, I knew she was going to do that. Like, one thing that I like to do is I kind of like to predict things with people. Like, if someone's going to like when you know someone's an asshole, but like everyone else in your group or your job doesn't know yet, you're just like, oh, I'm just waiting for it. And sometimes that's a fun game, because if I don't make some sort of fun out of it, I'm going to be judged either way. So it's better to be like, I told you, Fox, I told you, like, I told you this person wasn't shit. And in general, people don't understand you, because I think that being that most of the society or censors what's most important is what's in front of people, so the things that are not in front of them is not important, so it can become strange, and then conversely, the things that are important to you are the things you can see. So you're like, I want all this stimuli gone so that I can get started on the things that really matter, And I think that, I'm going to make a secondary video about spoons and the spoon theory. Can't get too much into it, but basically the idea is that people with chronic illness of any sort have a limited amount of spoons. Spoons kind of being like, the analogy is like kind of like units of energy throughout the day. So it's like, how someone might be tired. They're like, oh, I'm so tired. They had less spoons, or they used up most of their spoons moving in the morning or working overtime. So people with chronic illness and certain temperaments, it gets slashed in half, So you have to really care for yourself and treat yourself very well if you are a highly sensitive person. Yeah, and it's also different from like a personality. I think there's a lot of overlap and there's a lot of confusion, but it's not a personality disorder. It's not a mental illness. There can be an overlap, but it's not a mental illness. It's a personality trait. So you can be an HSP and, have a personality disorder, but it's not like one equals the other, I think a lot of times with, HSPs, it's hard to kind of figure out how you're going to deal with that. You probably have known since you were a child that you just had this special sensitivity that like things hit you harder. You know what I mean? I know for me, definitely, like over the past year, it's been really difficult. I mean, you have hate crimes, you've got mass shootings, you have social just sort of like unrest. And that's just the world at large. Like, that has nothing to do with, economic crisis and loneliness and everything. It's like it becomes a lot, because even for a normal, neurotypical person, these sort of things, can weigh heavy on it. Like, you can know people that don't even have, mental illness or emotional disorders, and just snap because they lost all their money or something else that they, identified as. And it's like, these are critical times for both our country and just kind of like mankind in general. And then, there's climate change and there's all this other stuff. Every day we're getting older. And I found it truly difficult. Thank God I was in school and I couldn't spend so much time thinking about, how fucked everything was. I was deeply like, I mean, some of the shootings that happened over the past year to Black males, particularly Alton Sterling's murder, I almost have PTSD because of that. Like, it's just like certain things, like, I can't get the image out of my mind. Like, it's so heinous. Like, there's so many horrific things going on, and I feel I feel it. You know what I mean? Like, I mentally put myself there. It's almost like you assume the identity of another person or another person's situation as soon as you're told that, and or people that you naturally are inclined to have sympathy for that sympathy kind of just gets translated straight into empathy. Took a short break, so forgive me if I didn't leave off where we started. But I wanted to say that in general, for intuitive people, INTJs, INTP, ENTP, ENTJs, I think we INFPs, you know the gamut, all intuitives, right? I think we are automatically going to have a higher level of sensitivity because in spending so much time with abstract thinking, deep thought, and whatnot, it would mean that our sensing's lower on the list, which means that it takes less of a place, which means that it takes less and less to both make us distracted and just overall feeling overwhelmed. Like that feeling of, like, for example, for hell for me would be a crowd of screaming people with that bright doctor's room fluorescent lighting. It just like it's just like it becomes too much for me. Like there are a lot of different environments that just evoke anxiety for me. So if you are a sensor, you're tougher in that sense. Like you're tougher in terms of everyday things because you're literally made your disposition and temperament is literally perfect for the general environment. So the general environment, promotes not hypersensitivity, but kind of like a sturdiness, which is not to say that hypersensitive people are weak at all. If anything, I think hypersensitive people are actually some of the strongest people in the world because we're sitting there and like if you could imagine a ditch, like the average or like a pool or something, it's like most of the world is swimming in shallow water, is like the 3 feet deep water is like when you're learning how to swim or something. And then we're over here in the freaking 20 feet deep waters and keeping our head above the water. And it's like, oh, that seems kind of difficult, right? You damn straight it's difficult. It's very difficult to do not just drown in your environment and, I don't have the luxury of reading the news every day or listening to the 5 o'clock news where it's like, catch us at 5, these 5 things going to be killing your kids. Some hidden ingredient, or local news is always of rape, murder, some general police brutality. And you're just like, well, yeah, so, we're fucked. You know what I mean? Like, it was very difficult for me this year, and you kind of can't get away from it if you want to share your life with people because someone's always going to tell you about the new death, the new celebrity death, the new murder, the new mass murder, the new mass shooting. I think that within the past 3 to 4 years, there's been over 900 mass shootings in the United States, which mass just means 3 or more. I believe like if 3 or more people get killed at a time, I think that qualifies as a mass shooting. I have to kind of double check that. And so seeing these things on TV, and just by the way, I'm also my number one favorite movie is Scarface. You know what I mean? So like there's a sort of rush I get. And my favorite game series was Grand Theft Auto. Like that's like my shit. You know what I mean? So there's a rush and a thrill to get that aggression out in a safe realm when it comes to violence, but actual real violence where real people die and real blood is shed is not appealing to me in any way. And it really makes me sick. It literally makes me sick. It makes me emotionally sick and makes me physically sick. Which kind of brings me to the physical aspects of being a highly sensitive person that makes it, extremely difficult if the other stuff wasn't already making things difficult for us. If it already wasn't, social pressure and being judged, being kind of like drowning in your own thoughts and projections and scenarios in your head, real and imagined. But also like, it affects you, gastrointestinal, like it affects your digestion. It affects your we keep it real on this Evil Bunny channel. It affects your bowels. It affects your menstruation cycle. It affects, um, waking up every night, every day with headaches, always feeling sleepy, tired, worn out, heavy fatigue, fibromyalgia. I mean, the list goes on and on. In general, a lot of these things even weaken your immune system because it's like you're literally, it's like in being sensitive, it's like literally the environment itself is almost not safe for you.